Welcome back to the On The Ball podcast, another episode of the best potty going round. We're back here again for another NFL review episode. This week's going to be a bit different, so I'll be doing 3 separate episodes. I got a busy week in Australia in terms of university, so the boys couldn't make it, so I'm going to be doing a review, a preview, and then a fantasy episode all by myself. So if you're keen, subscribe and follow the podcast and all that good stuff so you can watch all 3 episodes. It should be good fun. So this one, we're going to be reviewing week 4. All right, winners. Obviously, the winners and losers, as I do every week. Let me know your winners and losers down below. My winners, I'm actually going to start with the rookie quarterbacks as a whole. They've been pretty heavily criticized in their opening 3 weeks. And yes, some of them haven't played that well, but I think everyone goes on rookies in general, but especially quarterbacks. I think everyone does go a bit harsh on rookie quarterbacks. Like if you look, I think I mentioned it last week, but if you look back at Tom Brady, like I think about 70% of his rookie season, well, his first season as a starter, about 70% of the games he had a QB rating of like less than 65. So these blokes could be anything, and poor performance in the first month's not a big deal, but we saw some big growth from quite a few of them this week. Apart from Davis Mills, who did not have the finest of games, but, he wasn't really the highest pick and people weren't expecting him to start like the other ones. But apart from him, Zach Wilson, huge week for him. He's probably been the one that's been criticised the most, I'd have to say, maybe next to Trevor Lawrence. But, he managed to get the Jets their first win of the season, winning against the Titans in overtime. And he was a big part of it, really. He had a quarterback rating of 97.3. I know the quarterback rating system's not perfect, but I'll just use it as, it's a measure that tells you relatively how good their performance was. So that was pretty impressive after a couple of weeks of really poor performances. Trevor Lawrence also, he didn't end up as a winner, but he went down but only by 3 to the Bengals. And he himself had a rating of 96.5, had a really impressive first half, and then Burrow sort of decided to just shut out the game. Mac Jones as well, in prime time, almost produced a miracle win for the Patriots if it wasn't for the missed field goal. Lost to Tampa, obviously, by 2. And throughout the game, he had 19 straight completions at one point, which was really impressive. He had a rating of over 100. And I wasn't really expecting it from him, to be honest. I was expecting just like a measured performance, but I thought the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were really going to come out and try and make a statement and force the young gun into some turnovers, and he played pretty well. So Mac Jones looks really good. And then finally, Justin Fields. He notched up his first win of his career in the NFL, beating the Lions by 10. Had a rating of in the low 80s. He only had 11 completions. They only let him throw it about 17 times, but he had 209 yards on those 11 completions. And it was a big reason why they got the wins. So I guess that I understand a lot of these wins weren't against the best defenses in the competition, but still good to see these young guns after a really tough couple weeks for a lot of them, starting to show some signs of growth already so early on in their careers. And, I have to say rookie quarterbacks is year on year probably one of the more interesting topics to watch as the year progresses. So that's going to be one to watch. Also, watch the space on Trey Lance. Didn't really mention him because he, came into a game that he wasn't expecting to play. So, but if he starts this week, that's going to be a very interesting one. Onto the teams. My first winner is the New York Jets. As I mentioned, Zach Wilson, but the Jets as a whole deserve a mention. I did predict them to win 5 games in the preseason. So I'm not really shocked that they won, because to win 5 games, you got to, win one a month. So they're not going to be favorites in many games. So there are going to be a lot of games where, they might be a chance of getting an upset. And look, I didn't really think this was one of them. Yes, the Titans had some key injuries with Julio Jones and AJ Brown out, but New York just played really well, actually. They played pretty exciting. If you go and watch the highlights on YouTube, the crowd was getting into it. There were a lot of big plays. In terms of their skill position players, Jamison Crowder played his first game of the year. He had 7 catches, 61 yards. And then Corey Davis sort of was the big play guy. He had over 100 yards receiving, and Keelan Cole as well also had 92 yards receiving. So some weapons starting to fire there. The defense was also massive in this game. They did, I think, concede about 170 yards rushing or something, but still, in terms of the defensive stats, they played pretty well. They had 7 sacks, which is not an easy thing. CJ Mosley, Quinnen Williams, and Quincy Williams all played really, really well. And as I do my weekly awards, I have a defensive player of the week, and they were all right up there. They were probably in the top 5. So, yeah, shout out to those 3 guys playing really, really well. And if the Jets defense can really start getting a roll on, then all of a sudden Zach Wilson's job becomes easier, and they become, a bit of a dangerous team to play. And they go to London this week, I think. They're playing the Falcons. It's actually crazy. Like, I don't know, in terms of the times in America, I assume it's pretty early, but I know in Australia it's 12:30 at night, and the other games start at 3. So, like, you could genuinely watch NFL for like 14 hours in Australia on Monday, as I'm sure, I know that doesn't change around the world, but from 12:30 to about 2 p.m, it's pretty insane. I don't think I'll be doing that, but yeah, big win for the Jets, and let's see if they can get a bit of a roll on. Moving on to the Giants, as I mentioned with the Jets, I actually backed them to have a pretty decent record in the preseason, so I'm not surprised that they won a game like this, but after what we saw in the first 3 weeks, I think beating the Saints in their first game in New Orleans for the season, I didn't really like their chances. I mentioned in the preview last week that I thought that them covering the spread was a chance, because the spread was about 8 points, but I didn't really consider them winning it. And the way they did it was pretty impressive. Their defense did not play well, which was something that last year they sort of built their success around. Well, relative success. They had no sacks on the game, only 1 turnover, conceded over 400 yards. So based on that, you think they've lost the game easy and conceded a lot of points. So you've got to give it to maybe some red zone defense played well. But their offense was really impressive. They scored on their 3 last drives in this game, one being in overtime, the winner. Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard were both out injured, so some other guys got a chance to shine. Kadarius Toney, Kenny Golladay, and John Ross all had over 75 yards. Ross also had a touchdown, so good for those 3 guys new to the team to get the fans on side, because I know there's been some question marks over Toney and Golladay especially, and this was Ross's first game as he was on IR in the first 2 weeks. Daniel Jones had another blinder, QB rating of 108.5. He had 402 yards throwing off 28 completions, really impressive. And also Saquon Barkley had 126 scrimmage yards and 2 touchdowns. So if those 2 guys can keep playing this way for the rest of the year, they've got enough skill at wide receiver and tight end, and their defense maybe improves a couple notches. All of a sudden, this team could be a pretty tough matchup for some teams. And, I don't think they're going to get wins against, the Tampas of the world, but teams like the Saints, maybe like the Raiders, who are, looking at maybe 8 to 11 wins, it's not really a sure thing beating these Giants. So, yeah, the way Daniel Jones is playing is really impressive. He's been pretty criticized so far in his career, and I think we've all got to stop and respect that he's playing really well right now. So yeah, Danny Jones and the rest of that offense, well done. Defense want a little bit more from you, not going to lie, but shout out to them. Good win against the Sainers. And then finally, my third winner in terms of team is the Arizona Cardinals. They're the only undefeated team left in the NFL, going 4-0 to start the season. In this one, they destroyed the Rams by 17 away from home. Was not really backing them in this one. I thought their win over the Jags was a bit dodgy, where I think they won by 12 points, and one of them was like a Trevor Lawrence pick 6. So I didn't think their form was actually inspiring, and the week before they just had a close win against the Vikings. So I actually didn't think they were in inspiring form, but this shows that they're the real deal. They scored 7 times, and they only had 9 drives. So really, really good percentage of converting possession to scoring. They did a job on Cooper Kupp, to be honest. Byron Murphy was the main man there, playing a bit of a lockdown role on him. He allowed a QB rating of 28 when his opponent was targeted. He also had an interception. So yeah, really impressive start to the season by him. He was actually the guy who had that pick 6 that I mentioned before. But yeah, the first team who's sort of been able to keep Cup quiet, and it's the first game where the Rams haven't looked great. So definitely something that you'd expect teams in the next couple of weeks to try and emulate. The Cardinals forced one other turnover as well. They were really, really good on the offensive side of the ball, as I mentioned, in both the air and on the ground, which is good to see. They've always tried to establish the running games. It hasn't quite been that successful in the last, 20 matches they've played under Cliff Kingsbury. But this week they had 216 rushing yards from 40 attempts. Chase Edmonds had over 100 rushing. Connor had, I think, two rushing touchdowns. So they both played really well. And that's a pretty handy tandem in the backfield. Kyler had another blinder having a QB rating of 120. And like right now, if you rank the quarterbacks from 1 to 32, he'd be right up there. He's just so dangerous. Some of the little scurries he does when there's nothing on, and like he's so fast, it's ridiculous. He can get out of any situation. And yeah, he's just an absolute handful. Combine that with really good, talented receivers. Max Williams is playing really well at tight end. AJ Green's, showing some really good form for the first time in a while. And pair that with Christian Kirk, Rondale Moore, DeAndre Hopkins. It's a scary offense. And then last year, the offense was frightening, but their defense wasn't great. And this year, it looks to have definitely gone up a couple levels. So, yeah, Arizona is definitely an interesting team. Going to be interesting to see how they go in the next couple weeks. But because, like we've seen, might mention in my losers, but we've seen the NRL public go a little bit early on some teams. So you don't want to go too early on the Cardinals, but definitely good signs in the desert. My losers, my first one, as I mentioned, the Giants are my winner. My first loser's got to be the Saints. I don't really like having losers and winners from the same game because it's sort of taking away from the winner, but at the end of the day, I don't think this was a good performance from the Saints. I predicted them to win 11 games in the preseason, and I'm really starting to get worried about that now. I just don't think Peyton... I don't agree with Sean Payton's tactics right now. He hasn't let Winston throw more than 23 times in a game so far in the opening month. And I don't know if you can do that because it's not like they're going ahead in every game they're playing and just running the house down. So I know that he doesn't trust him, but I think you've got to let him have a crack, to be honest, because otherwise I have no idea why they went into the season with him, because it's frustrating because they've got one of the best running backs in the competition. They've got a good O-line on paper, and their defense is pretty good as well. It's a top 10 defense. So yeah, it's pretty frustrating that they've gone into this because it seems like a bit of a wasted year if they just got a quarterback that they don't really like. So I don't really know why they didn't trade for someone. They didn't even draft someone. So I'm a bit confused by the decision making there. Taysom Hill also went under center a few times. He's had some success in the red zone, but he threw an interception from his 3 pass attempts here. Kamara, 26 carries, a lot more usage than we've ever seen, but he's been playing well, but he had no targets, which is weird. If you write down the strengths of Alvin Kamara, his first one's probably his pass catching ability. He can, catch one at the line of scrimmage and get 6 yards after the catch routinely. He's just good at making people miss. So very strange use of him there. I don't know if the Giants really paid attention to him or something because he is their main skill weapon. But strange stuff. And the defense, it's been hit and miss so far this year. You definitely think if the offense isn't going to be a dominant force, which it certainly won't when you've got a quarterback only throwing it 20 times a game, your defense needs to be top 5 in the competition, and right now it's not. They didn't even get a single sack against Daniel Jones, which is an O-line that's, pretty deplorable at times. So that's pretty disappointing from the defensive front. They also had 10 minutes more possession in this game, and they were up by, I think, 12 points or something heading into the fourth quarter, and they still managed to lose it. So, yeah, really disappointing loss from the Saints, and also first game back at home. You thought this was going to be not a get-right game for them, but a game that took them to 3-1, and all of a sudden they were going to be smokies for playoffs, where now it's sort of on the shoes on the other foot, and it looks like it's going to be really hard for them to have a good year. I think they've, I don't know, I just think they've got to let Winston have a crack, and they've just got to hope that after being in the system, after watching Drew Brees for a while, that yes, he might have a couple bad games, but in the long run this season, it's going to be beneficial for the team if they have a quarterback who they can trust when they need to go after games, because otherwise, as soon as they go down or as soon as it's tight, they're really, really going to struggle because teams can know they just have to stop the run because the team doesn't trust their own quarterback. My next biggest loser is Miami Dolphins. I think they've actually had the worst start in the whole comp. Like, when we put expectation versus performance, they've had a fairly tough fixture, not played anyone easy so far, but they're 1-3, and I think I had them winning 12 games on the season. Like, it's just not good enough. They won 10 games last year, and they've seemingly gone backwards. They have the Bucks this week as well, so all of a sudden they lose that one. They're 1-4, and you can almost write them out of the playoff contention. I know the schedule does get a lot easier after that, but still, that's not a place you want to be. What's gone wrong for this team? I don't know. The only chance for them is that Tua comes back and starts tearing it up. But from what we've seen of Tua so far, it doesn't look likely. Their defense has really got to start cooking as well. Just some stats from this year versus last year. They're currently third worst in scoring percentage per drive this year, and they're also fourth worst in that stat in terms of defense. So they're not good on either side of the ball right now, especially in the red zone. Last year, I think their defense was like top 5 in that stat, and their attack was in the top half. So yeah, really disappointing. Like, they had in this game, they lost by 10 points or something, and they had 2 touchdowns in their final 2 drives in the fourth quarter. So they really covered up what was a really bad day for them. A Colts team that has not been impressing so far this season. A Colts team with a quarterback with 2 sprained ankles, and they got torn up by him. And they also let Jonathan Taylor have over 6 yards per carry. Not good enough. They've averaged, on the game, they averaged less than 10 yards per completion. And I know you've got Jacoby Brissett in, but ultimately I don't think he's that much worse than Tua. So I don't see why the offense has taken such a hit, or supposedly a hit. Their RBs in the game had 27 yards from 13 carries. So just nothing is going right for this offense, whether it be passing, running. It's also not going right on the defensive end, whether it be stopping the run or stopping the pass. And it's just, really worrying right now because, if they were losing these games in close fashion and their defense was playing really well and their offense was a bit lacking, you'd probably be okay with that because you'd be like, well, Tua comes back, they have an easier schedule, they're going to start pumping out some wins. But right now, they've got a seriously long way to go, and even though that schedule just does lighten up if they keep playing this way, I'm not even sure if it's they're going to make most of that easy run of fixtures. So yeah, worried about the Dolphins right now. Next up, I've got the Broncos and Raiders. Look, I'm not they're not really losers here, but it's just sort of I think everyone just needs to relax a little bit. I think everyone going into this week, they were both undefeated. I was listening to podcasts saying these teams were going to go 12, 13 wins each. And I just don't think they're that good, to be honest. And I think this week we sort of had a reminder of that. The Raiders went down to the Chargers, and the Broncos got not bashed, but they got beaten down to a halt by the Ravens. I've predicted them to have 7 and 9 wins respectively. They'll probably get a few more than that, maybe 9 or 10. But yeah, I think teams thinking, I think people on podcasts and stuff like that saying they're going to beat the Chiefs for the AFC West. I think you just need to settle a little bit. They're still decent teams, but yeah, I think everyone just needs to chill. And then finally, the AFC South is my final loser. I actually have this as the worst division in the NFL now. It was the NFC East for the last couple of years. I mentioned it in the predictions episode before the season that this might be something that happens, and I'm officially going to say it now. The division currently has 4 wins. The Titans have 2, and the Colts and Texans are providing 1 each there. I just believe the NFC East actually had a pretty good weekend with Washington, Giants, and Dallas all getting up, and Philly went down in a shootout with Kansas. So, yeah, for me, none of these AFC South teams look good right now. I don't think they're going to be as bad as the NFC East last year, but I think in terms of this year, they're definitely worse. So, the Colts and Titans look like they're going to be whichever of them makes the playoffs, it looks like they're going to be one of the weaker teams heading into that playoff. So, yeah, not good signs for that division or any of those 4 teams. All right, time for my awards of the week, and then we're going to get into my updated season predictions. Awards of the week, NFC Player of the Week. Statistically, probably didn't have the best game of all the players in this conference, but my NFC Player of the Week goes to Saquon Barkley. It might be a little bit like storyline based, the fact that he's been injury ravaged and struggling in the last 2 years, but he had a huge hand in this W over the Saints. He had 126 scrimmage yards with 2 touchdowns, scored the winner in overtime, and he also scored the touchdown, which got them back in the game with 6 minutes left. He had 1.7 yards before contact, which is that's really bad. That's like bottom 10% of the NFL. Still managed 4 yards per carry. So, he's probably not gonna be having these freak games where he's averaging 6 yards per carry anymore with this O line. But if he can keep doing that, their running game's definitely going to be sufficient, and it's going to help the passing game out, which he was a big factor in this week. They definitely lent on him a lot more with Shepard and Slayton out, but Saquon, if he can get back to his best, Giants all of a sudden have a really dangerous offense with one of the best players in the competition. So here's my player of the week. In the NFC, in the AFC, it's got to be Tyreek Hill, 3 touchdowns, 186 receiving yards from 11 catches. He was just a huge part in the 12-point win. He scored 2 of his touchdowns in the final quarter, which you probably assume is junk time, but they were only 5 points up, and then he went bang, bang, scored back-to-back touchdowns. So, yeah, really, really good game. He has had a relatively quiet start to the season. I'm sure a lot of fantasy owners out there were starting to get worried, and then he just reminds you that he's one of the most lethal wide receivers in this competition. His pace is ridiculous. Everything about him is just so good. And that he was my player of the week. My offensive rookie of the week, Zach Wilson. There were probably guys who had a better game, but I like to give it to a team who won, So he led the lads to an overtime victory, coming off 2 sub-50 rating games, throws 298 yards, only 1 turnover, was only sacked once. He had a rating of 97.3, and he got pressured a lot less, which was really, really good. And statistically, he actually had a worse performance in terms of bad throw percentage. It was up more, but I think maybe because he was under less pressure, he was being a bit more aggressive with his throwing, but ultimately it got the job done. And he had enough big plays to excite all the Jets fans, which was really good to see. And he led the Jets to their first win and his first win of his career. So for me, that's enough to make him Offensive Rookie of the Week. And Defensive Player of the Week, although it's a bit of a cop-out just to give it to the guy who had 2 interceptions, but it's got to be Trayvon Diggs. Panthers had 14 points halfway through the fourth quarter when this guy got benched. And he was not benched, he got rested, but he was a huge reason because of that. 2 interceptions. He was targeted 7 times, only allowed 2 completions, 14 yards. 11 of those 14 were yards after the catch. So, ridiculous. He allowed a QB rating of 0, and it just shows how good he is that they are resting him halfway through the fourth against a Panthers team that was undefeated heading into this one. And yeah, he looks like he's really one of the best quarterbacks in the competition right now. And he's, frightening for any wide receiver and quarterback who's going up against him. So Trayvon Diggs, absolutely killing it. Probably unlucky for that to only be his first award of the season, but he could have a few more if he keeps playing the way he is. All right, moving into my updated preseason predictions. So I'm going to go through each division. First of all, I'm going to pinpoint my biggest differences. And unfortunately, they're all actually negative. I don't like to be too negative on the potty, but they all are actually teams that I overrated going into the season. And then I'm going to discuss my updated playoff bracket. I'm going to do this every 4 weeks. So, once a month. It happens, 4 times in the season. So I think that'll be an interesting amount. All right, so the biggest differences from my preseason to my current predictions. The AFC East, I've kind of gone off them completely. I know the Bills have had a really impressive last 3 weeks following a disappointing week 1. However, I had them winning 15 games going into it, and I will contradict myself because I do have Tampa Bay winning 15 games as well. But I don't know. I just think the state of the NFL right now, I think there's not really a dominant team that's going to just win week after week after week. And I know it's early on, so there's probably going to be more upsets early than late, but I don't know. I don't really trust a team that much to have 15 or more wins. And, they've got teams in their division that aren't easy, and they've not got the easiest schedule. So I'm actually moving the Bills from 15 wins to 12 wins. For example, they've got Kansas this week. So all of a sudden they have 2 losses. And if I was predicting them to make 15 wins, that means they're winning the rest of the season undefeated. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Maybe 12 is a little bit conservative, but yeah, that's what I'm going with. Then I'm also retracting Miami and the Patriots. I had them winning 12 and 11 respectively, which was just very optimistic going into the year. Looking back on it, I've now got Miami winning 9 games, which will probably be a decent effort from here at 1-3 with the Bucks next week. But I think they can do it. I think their defense will start cooking in a little bit, and I still have hope for Tua. I still reckon he can come back and be a great player for them. And the Patriots, I don't think they're good enough to win 11 games. I know they almost just beat the Buccaneers, but I don't think their defense is as dominant as I was expecting when I tipped them to win 11 games, and also their offense isn't great. So, yeah, I've got them winning 8 games, which I think is a fair prediction. Then over to the NFC East, I've also changed my Washington and Giants predictions. I know it's a bit rough because they both had decent wins on the weekend, but I had Washington winning 9 games, and that was going to be purely off the back of their defense, which is just not playing well at all. They just conceded 30 points to the Falcons. So, yeah, this is a massive drop, but I'm dropping them from 9 to 5 games, and I know they've already won 2, so I'm like, it's probably ridiculous. They're probably going to win like 7 or something, but yeah, I think 9 was a very big just overestimation from me, and I think 6 or 7's a bit more accurate, but I've gone with 5, and then the Giants, I've also bumped them down 4, which once again, I don't feel great about because they did look decent on the weekend, but I had them winning 8 games before. I'm now dropping them down to 4 games. I've just seen who they're playing this year, and that's probably a big factor. They've got the AFC West, who all of a sudden look like 4 really good teams, which going into the season, I wasn't really seeing it that way. So that's probably another reason why I've put them down. So I've got the Giants only winning 4 games, which looks, once again, probably a bit harsh. I'll probably win 6, but yeah, I've got them winning 4 at the moment. And then my final one's the Saints. I had them winning 11 games. And the way they're playing right now, the way they're not letting Jameis throw is, I think it's capping their potential. So it's also like lifting their floor, if you get what I mean. But I don't see them winning 11 games at this rate. And I'll give them 8 games. All right, my projected playoff bracket on the AFC side of things, winning the AFC North. I've still got Cleveland. I've got them now winning 14 games as opposed to 12. AFC East, I've still got Buffalo, as I mentioned, 15 down to 12 games. AFC South, I've changed it from Indianapolis winning 11 games to now Tennessee winning with 11 games. I think I actually swapped them exactly. I think I had in the preseason Indy 11, 10, Tennessee 10, and now I've got Tennessee 11, Indy 10. So actually Indy 9, which we'll talk about in a sec. So I've got Tennessee winning that. West, I've got Kansas still winning it with 14. I had them with 15 in the preseason, but I'll take 1 off. My wildcard one in the AFC is going to be the Chargers. I've got them winning 12 games now. I had them winning 10 in the preseason, but yeah, they've really impressed me on both sides of the ball to start this season. So I've got them comfortably making it as the top wildcard. Then I've got the Raiders making it as the second wildcard with 10 wins. I don't love the Raiders team that much, but I just think 3-1 start. They've got some easy games against that NFC East. I think they will just accumulate enough wins to be there. And then wildcard 3, I've got Indianapolis. And that's probably going to be a big shock being at 1-3, but I've only got them winning 9 games. So I think that third wildcard spot right now is not looking great in the AFC. Baltimore's probably stiff to miss out. I had them missing out on the same win total as did Denver and Miami with 9. On the NFC side of things, winning the NFC North, I have Green Bay. I've lifted them from 12 to 13 wins. Dallas, I've kept at 11 wins. Tampa Bay, I've lifted from 14 to 15 wins. And the Rams, I've kept at 12 wins. So my winners of the NFC divisions have all stayed the same. My wild cards, I've got one change. I've kicked out the Saints, and I'll let you know who I've brought in a second. I've got the 49ers being the first wild card, winning 11 games, which is right now, that's on fraud watch, that call a little bit. They don't look great. I had them winning 12 in the preseason. Now I've got them winning 11. Next up, I have Arizona winning 11 games. I only had them winning 9 in the preseason, but they're 4-0. They play the AFC South, who I've just crowned as the worst division in the NFL. If they win all those 4 games, that puts them to 8 wins. So all of a sudden, I definitely can see them winning, 11 or 12 games. Then I was low on this team going into the year, only on 10 wins, but I've still got them making the wild cards, and that's Seahawks. I've got all NFC West teams making it. I just don't really like the other NFC sides outside of those division winners. I think my next best was Minnesota all the way down at 8 wins. So I'm not high on the Panthers, even though they do have an easy schedule. I'm not that high on the Saints. And yeah, the rest I don't think anyone really rates anyway. So yeah, I've got the whole NFC West, which I believe would be a first. Well, yeah, it would be a first because they've only bought in a third wild card last year. So that would be huge to see. I've almost got the whole AFC West making it as well. Denver missing out on tiebreakers. So let me know your predicted playoff brackets right now. Let me know if my calls are shite. And that's been another episode of the On the Ball podcast. I'm going to go run now, which I'm sure you don't care about, but I thought I'd let you know. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And we'll be back at you probably tomorrow with a preview, and then probably the day after that with a fantasy sort of preview as well. So stay tuned for those two. Should be good fun, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers.